Hello everyone, this is update for December 20th, 2023, day 665 of the war and of the date update. Also catch up for December 18 and 19. I'm going to start with general strategic update, and then I'm going to switch to the situation on the battlefield in Ukraine. Several important strategic developments are happening. First, it looks like the war in the Near East and Persian Gulf is expanding and really escalating to war with Iran. Looks like Israel army is attacking Hezbollah in Lebanon, which is Iranian proxy. The same is happening in Western Yemen, where the Houthis are they obviously provoke this conflict, and now this is escalating into whatever the conflict is going to be there. It's unclear to me whether it's going to be actually physical presence of the US and European troops on the ground in Western Yemen. Again, the Western Yemen is Iranian proxy. So as you can see, this is all very coordinated. There's also news that citizens of the Western countries are asked to leave Lebanon, obviously Yemen, including Iraq, Syria. So it seems that this whole conflict is really expanding pretty quickly, and obviously the casualties, the whole situation is going to get much worse there. Which again will expand what I discussed before. It will expand the need for all sorts of ammunition, military troops, and everything, and that's going to make the this is another front. Like if it was in Israel one, Ukraine another one, and then there's this Western Yemen. There is looming around Taiwan situation, which is unclear. Even though there are I don't know if it's rumor or true that U.S. and China agreed on basically Taiwan becoming part of China in some time in future in a sort of peaceful way. If that's potentially might be a solution to the looming crisis there. It's unclear, but I believe it's probably very likely situation. It's simply, this is the answer in some ways that U.S. does not have capacity to fight so many, on 4 or 5 fronts with so many adversaries, and Europe simply does not have military power, production facilities, so it's completely defenseless, effectively. So there's effectively close to zero. I'm not going to say zero; it's never true, but very low military value in potential conflict. So everything has to be relied on the U.S., and U.S. alone cannot sustain so much sort of pressure on many fronts at the same time. So this is probably also related to the fact that the agreement includes transfer of the chip processing facilities to Japan, Germany, US, and so on. And then basically Taiwan is probably going to be factually handed over to China. They probably will get the existing chip producing facilities there, which sort of also keeps China happy. So in a way, it's probably unhappy compromise, but there apparently was no better solution at this point. There's also another problem that's not really considered around this chip manufacturing, is that, as I mentioned before, chip manufacturing in the US, in the current sort of US system, is dead end. It's not going to work. The most likely it's going to be the only viable is going to be probably Japan, probably partially Germany. And so this really means that, again, everything is going to be super concentrated, and it's also going to be more expensive than in Taiwan. then it's going to be less competitive, less sort of advances moving forward. So the whole basically system that West is relying on is becoming less competitive. So basically, China, again, in the long run, it's going to be very negative for the West because it's becoming less competitive. Well, China is getting access probably, and this is always the assumption. I don't have 100%, any knowledge, but there is, based on information that's available, it seems that the China will get access to the more advanced technology, manufacturing, and also the most important is people who have the knowledge. That's the most important treasure, and those Taiwanese citizens, they are not willing to relocate to US. They obviously don't want to move to Japan. So effectively, China gets everything it wants with a delay probably of a couple of years. I don't know, it's going to be 2, 3, 4 years, but it's in the long run very huge victory for China. And it seems to me that this is sort of forced compromise that the West and specifically US had to do, giving the whole situation on the around the world, giving that it's facing Iran, then facing Russia directly at this point, and China would be too much to handle. And that's probably the situation overall. Now I'm gonna switch a little bit to situation in strategic situation in Ukraine and Russia related to the war. So in Russia, Russian government or Russian president really, they decided to create a new military district against Finland, because Finland essentially at this point has U.S. troops on its territory or will have very soon. So there is another sort of front line of confrontation. In some ways, it's really starting to remind the front line during World War II between Soviet Union and Nazi Germany at that time. So basically, from the White Sea to the Black Sea, essentially. So and the result. In order to, because they created this, Russian government created this new military district. I think it's called Leningrad military district. And so they need to form new military units, probably new armies, because military district in sort of traditional Soviet way, it means several armies there. This is obviously during Soviet times, so it was more, everything was at much larger scale, much better organized than the present Russia. It's definitely no match to the Soviet Union. Nevertheless, they try to sort of replicate what they know, what's in their DNA and historical memory. And in order to sort of to make it real, they increase Russian military by, I think, plus minus 170,000 soldiers. This is, I'm not talking about the administrative personnel, because that's probably another 100,000 in administrative personnel. So the Russian army will become 1.5 million soldiers. I mean troops. That's probably a better way to say. So basically, military personnel. So and administrative, it's gonna get well over 2 million, probably pushing 2.5 million. So again, there's another increase in Russian army coming, and that's gonna happen by December 31st, 2023. This is sort of very clear. Russia is not backing down. There's very clear message coming from the Russian president, from his speaker, that there is no it's not time for peace. There's no basis for the peace in Ukraine. This is for those people in the West who still believe there is some kind of going to be negotiation and deal around Ukraine and so on. There's no deal coming. It's whole Ukraine or nothing. So the situation is really binary, 1 or 0. From Russian perspective at this point, and from Ukrainian perspective, the same. There is no way Ukraine can exist in sort of like when it's half of the country, and especially it's losing one of the important industrial regions and so on. So Ukraine is becoming not viable country effectively, and so that will by itself will create huge drain on the West, and the West is unable to support Ukraine in the long run, given what's going on in the US. It's very clear, and Europe is sort of following what's going on in the US, and so it's basically becoming a situation where it's like, okay, we just want to swipe this under the rug as if this never happened, and if Ukraine goes to Russia, okay, well, that's sort of that's a deal we have to have, similar to probably allegedly, as I said, what's going on with Taiwan, where it's going to be peacefully handed over to China effectively. From Ukrainian perspective, as I mentioned before, Ukraine has a completely inadequate leadership at all levels, but most importantly politically. It's absolutely dysfunctional. It's basically rule of one person who has very little competence, and effectively there are strong indication that he is or his immediate aides are working for Russia effectively as Russian agents. So it's, again, there is a huge problem inside of Ukraine, and it makes it defenseless effectively in the long run as well. Nevertheless, Ukrainian president decided to counter his Russian counterpart on December 19th. He gave sort of there was again also Q&A and speech, and the takeaway I would say from that speech is that there's no clear vision, there is no clear message, there is simply deflection of responsibility. So, for example, he was deflecting towards the head of Ukraine military the need to mobilize 450,000 new people into Ukrainian army, basically effectively saying, well, this is what they're asking for, this is not my idea, all questions for them. Even technically not technically, but actually legally, he's the head of Ukrainian military forces, so he is in charge of all of the Ukrainian military forces, as I said. So it's his direct responsibility per Ukrainian constitution. So again, this clearly shows that the person is not the right person for the situation. The situation is becoming very dire for Ukraine, and realization of that is slowly sinking into Ukrainian society, because this propaganda created euphoria that Russia is crumbling and we're winning and we have West behind our back, and now this is almost like in a way like a drug addict coming down from this high, going into basically depression, because the reality is so, different relative to the impression that was created by propaganda. And as I said before, propaganda is always poison, and in most cases it's directed actually against the people it's supposed to help, but it never helps. It's really a poison, that sort of internal poison that's really hurting society in the long run. And this is the exact case in Ukraine, in the Ukrainian situation. So again, there's no clear vision to how to defend Ukraine to, let's say, victory, how to restore its territorial integrity. So basically deflection of most of the questions were obviously journalists who were sort of critical or can ask critical questions were not allowed to participate in this Q&A. Not to say that Russian Q&A was different. There's a similar situation there. It's all filtered out, and the same in Ukraine. And there is a lot of commentators in Ukraine are saying that Ukraine is turning into another Russia, which is not what Ukrainian citizens want and not what they want to fight. It's very clear. Again, it's all going back to the rot at the top, at the political top in Ukraine. Going back to this number of 450,000 soldiers that needs to be mobilized. This is basically restating the same number that I mentioned before, where head of Ukraine military is asking for 20,000 people being mobilized every month. So this is a request for 2024 in order to be able to hold sort of the line to front line. This is and potentially maybe doing some offensive, but I would say I think at this point it's very clear realization: there's no skills, there's no competence to do that, and there is problem with the military help from the West, which makes it also very unrealistic idea. So this is not just like one time mobilization of 450,000 people. It's just basically replenishment of the Ukrainian army over time, and this is probably to extent was misunderstood in this generally this number is somehow perceived as Ukrainian army lost 450,000 people, and basically that's where it stands. So it's basically totally destroyed. This is not correct understanding. As I said before, the rough number, and again, this very hard to have any correct understanding of the losses, but it's about 150,000 people dead, and probably growing at this point, could be 160, 170, and about the same number of people who were sort of out of the military due to the wounds and the prisoners of war and so on. So roughly it's I would say less than 400,000 that are sort of out of the military at this point. So this really means that the original army that Ukraine started war with basically completely wiped out. I mean, sure, there are some people who are staying from, that they sort of managed to survive due to their personal skills and abilities and so on. But largely, statistically, it's there's nearly complete turnover in people in the army during this since the beginning of the conflict. In Russian army is the same story. So so I would say I estimate of the sort of survivability on the front line of the average statistical, obviously, average person or average soldier is probably a little bit less than 12 months, around 10, 11 months, which actually is much higher than during World War II in the Soviet army, where it usually would be like 3 months. So I know that obviously the intensity, it's hard to compare, obviously, the two conflicts, but sort of survivability is a little bit, as I said, looks like much longer. Now let's switch to the walk through the front line. Before I do that, I just want to explain the situation, how to say it will unfold. So without obviously military aid in the first place, Ukrainian army will not be able to hold the line in the long run. There are already calls within Ukraine to what's called straighten the front line, move to the better positions. This is effectively rationalizations why to start retreat. So basically, it's going to be slow. Basically, it's a calls for slow retreat, and so they probably will become louder as things gonna get worse. There is fewer sort of military tools in Ukrainian disposal. One more item is there were also another round of polls about the support for Ukrainian president and Ukrainian parliament and Ukrainian government overall, and they show all negative results. Obviously, Ukrainian parliament is essentially has close to zero trust of Ukrainian population, Ukrainian citizens, and there was a significant drop. I think 20 points in support of Ukrainian president. He still enjoys sort of majority support, at least based on these polls, and I would say, taking it with a grain of salt. So this is the only information available. I would say probably a real situation is worse than that, but the polls show that, and they also clearly show that support for Ukrainian actually army and the head of Ukraine army is actually remaining very high and much higher at this point than support for Ukrainian president, and that's probably part of the reasons that Ukrainian president started attacks against the head of Ukrainian army. So there is, this spiral of confrontation probably will sort of accelerate and become more intense as things start to unravel on the front line. I'm not even bringing up a question about the economy and financial support for general population, because that's obviously going to be a huge problem. Probably starting end of January and into February, March, it will be the problems will become very acute. Without financial aid, and Ukrainian government already announced that they're going to be printing money, or printing literally money and unbacked credit, basically issuing unbacked currency, which will actually accelerate implosion. It will make things much worse in shorter period of time. So it's almost like a self-destruction, shooting yourself in the head, because that will completely destroy financial system, destroy any businesses that are a little bit more complex in nature than primitive. And that will put Ukrainian economy in complete disaster. It's going to get even worse, and it will impoverish people completely, which will create basis for social unrest very quickly. So this is almost recipe for, as I said, 1917 moment. Could not be, you cannot come up with worse idea what to do. This is exactly one of the reasons how 1917 happened in the Russian Empire. As you probably know, there's a famous expression by Lenin that the easiest way to destroy society is to destroy its currency. And this is what the Ukrainian government effectively announced that they're going to do. This is just gives you example of how incompetent these people are at all levels. It's a pervasive problem, and so again, things will, when I would say with very high probability, will get very difficult in Ukraine in coming 2024. Russia is obviously understanding all of this, and so there's no reason to sort of change or back out of this. They basically feel this is the prey is almost ready to be killed, and they just basically pushing sort of making sort of last effort to finish the prey. This is how the Russia is seeing this moment, and there's no way. There's no reason, there's no incentive for Russia to start any kind of negotiations or anything, because they they're almost done with their plan, and with very big strategic win if this is where to happen. Because as I said, Russia will gain control of the entire of Ukraine. Um, so now let's actually. Oh, and then I want to mention one more situation in the U.S. So this funding from U.S. Did not happen, and the best way I can explain is that, as I mentioned before, this was the whole funding was really about Democratic Party willing to sort of compromise on closing border or changing this immigration policy in the U.S. And there is a problem for Democratic Party is because if they do that, they will lose a lot of voters, and there is election coming up in the U.S. in November of 2024. So this is really setting up Democratic Party for complete disaster. The current U.S. president already trailing its contender from Republican Party. So it's effectively suicidal move. So what this really means, I cannot say for sure, but with very high probability, this gridlock that's there in the U.S. Parliament probably will not get resolved till elections and until new person is in power, and if this is going to be the Republican representative, it's probably means that this is it. The Ukraine got everything it will get, and at this point there won't be any much financial aid forthcoming for Ukraine, and also again question about the military aid as well. And actually, I would even add another thing in terms of internal U.S. situation. It seems that the budget, which was not passed so far, it probably will not get passed. There will be just extensions for the entire year until election happen in the U.S. This is also a very likely scenario because effectively the political system is becoming dysfunctional and cannot sort of resolve problems or even attend to the sort of daily needs, let's put this way, such as passing some kind of budget. So there will be this basically extension, sort of temporary solutions and band-aids, and probably until the election, and probably till January of 2025 when there is new or not new, who knows what's going to happen there, but basically until there is election and a new president or existing president will be sworn again, and there's obviously refresh of the parliament in the U.S. happening as well in November. So again, this whole, as you can see, the whole situation for the West is really becoming extremely difficult, and the while China is in its own extremely difficult situation internally, it's definitely also it's disaster situation that's going on unraveling in China. It's at the same time Russia is managing its difficulties relatively well, and I don't know enough about Iran, but it seems to be the same is happening there as well. So the sort of, how to say, balance is switching sort of a little bit more in favor of this Russia, China, Iran alliance, at least for the moment. We'll see how things are gonna happen. Now let's switch actually to the situation on the front line in Ukraine. As a summary, things more or less the same. Strong Russian pressure, and Ukraine army attempting to hold current defensive positions. But let's first, I'll start in a clockwise fashion, as I always do. Starting from very north, situation is quiet along the state border, no changes there. Now let's move to the North Luhansk front line. Things here are more or less the same. Russian tactical pressure northeast of Kupiansk. Also attacks here near Kislivka. Again, the same idea, because the goal is Kupiansk. Some pressure around this forest here, Kremina forest, and a little bit north around Terny, but it's all tactical, and it's not where the main effort for Russian army is. It's more like a distraction pressure to keep Ukrainian resources on this front line, and so they're not going to get transferred to the area where there is real pressure, which is Avdiivka, where Ukrainian command already transferred to that area some resources from Zaporizhya front line. So Russian command is actively attempting to prevent that from happening. So there is no reinforcements coming from other sectors of the front. Now let's move to North Donbass front line. Northern sector more or less quiet, as it's always, or not always, but it's been for a long time. It's probably, I believe, like May of 2023. There is Russian pressure west of Bakhmut. As you can see, the same areas. There are some advances around Klishivka by Russian forces. Again, this is all very small tactical advances, like 120, 200 meters. They are sort of not critical in the context of this sort of specific advances, but I would say over a long period of time, it's sort of slow grind where effectively defines slowly, very, very slow snail's pace retreat of Ukrainian army at this point. And which, as I said before, will accelerate if there is if Ukrainian army started to feel acute shortages of ammunition and problem with artillery, because as I said before, Western supplied artillery is backbone of Ukrainian defenses at this point, and losing that will have catastrophic impact, let's put this way, on the front line. Now let's look at central Donbass front line. Things continue the way sort of they were strong Russian pressure around Avdiivka. There's really almost extremely stubborn desire to capture Avdiivka in very short period of time, probably sort of for the new year. I'm skeptical that's going to happen. So far, Ukrainian forces are holding defensive positions, but it's very clear losses on both sides are heavy. How long Ukrainian side can sustain that it remains to be seen. In the long run, as I said before, I'm very pessimistic on Ukrainian side, Ukrainian ability to hold on to Avdiivka. Then south of Donetsk, Russian troops are actively pushing in the southwestern direction from this Marinka salient that they created. Effectively, now they want to eliminate this Ukrainian salient around Novomykhailivka. This is a new major objective that's sort of next on the list after Avdiivka for the Russian army. There were some initial successes where Russian troops moved, 200, 300 meters in the direction of Novomykhailivka. But so far, looks like those advances has been stalled. It doesn't mean that things are stable and in perfect shape here. Now let's move to Zaporizhya front line. Things here are fairly quiet. The only area where Russian side is putting pressure is around Robotyne. They're actively trying to eliminate this Robotyne salient that was created during so-called Ukrainian offensive. They're making tiny progress. I'm saying like 50 meters, 100 meters here and there. but largely the salient is still there. And again, this is most likely basically pressure is being put, so Ukrainian command cannot transfer troops from here to Avdiivka, which they already did. 47th Brigade, as you can see, has been moved. So they probably don't want, like, let's say, 82nd Brigade to be moved there and so on. So now let's move to the front line along the Dnipro River. Things here remain the same, status quo. Ukrainian forces maintain this bridgehead around Krinky. Russian side is basically actively attempting to bomb it, to destroy it using basically artillery and rocket attacks and UAVs. However, that's I would say it's a futile attempt, because you need a strong, support by infantry. At the same time, the supporting this bridgehead in the long run without advancing from it is more of a liability for Ukrainian side, because otherwise there's really no need to there's no benefit out of it, and it is costly for Ukrainian side to support it as well. So that's all for today. Thanks for watching. Until next time, bye bye.